Welcome, everyone, to another installment of Office Hours. Today, I have Professor Shaun Sanders, who teaches Law 633 Business Principles in Law. Professor Sanders, thank you so much for doing this. I'd love to just start with your professional journey. What did you do straight out of law school? What have been your various career stops along the way? And how have all of that influenced
Yeah.
what you're currently doing?
Gosh, so I have what some would call a non-traditional career path. So I spent most of my life in the startup world for about 20 years. Had a couple of my own, did a lot of consulting, and then went to law school sort of later on in my career path. And right out of law school, I wasn't quite sure if practicing was going to be for me or not, and I had an opportunity to help build out an accelerator program. So I got hired on to help companies raise money and all that other fun stuff. And then when I was there, I met a an investment firm who really liked me and found out that I was an attorney that was flying under the radar. So I ended up working there as corporate counsel for a few years, doing a lot of like business negotiations, fundraising, all the contract work you can imagine that comes with that type of job. Did that for a few years before, I just kind of got back into the business world. I like risk. Risk is fun. Risk is profitable. Risk is entertaining. And I was always the attorney that was like, as an attorney, like here are the boundaries. But as a business guy, roll dice, see what happens. So anyway, that's kind of my career path now as a business consultant, helping startups and early stage companies to grow, raise capital, and succeed.
Do you feel like your legal background helps you in what you do today?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Like I always tell people like though I am not a practicing attorney these days, I am happy I went to law school because it the education you get it just gives you an edge. It lets you know the boundaries of your container and how hard you can push. Like the best way to think about it is the how does like business and law fit together? It's law is the parameters. So if you're playing a game of chess, the business is like what pieces do you move and when. But law is the constraints of like, the bishop can only go diagonal and the horsey can only go so far. And I know it's not a horsey, but it's fun. But anyway, so knowing the rules, I feel like attorneys are the only people who have read the rules to the board game that we are all playing. And knowing going into a negotiation and knowing how hard you can push on a certain term, or doing a marketing campaign and knowing where the edge is, or starting a new company and knowing kind of what pitfalls to avoid so you don't rack up some huge bill. It is been invaluable, and it's made me more, dangerous as a business consultant, very much more sought after by my clients.
That's great. You kind of beat me to my second question, but
Ah,
let's expand a little bit on that. So you talked about the intersection of law and business. What do
yeah.
you think business folks need to know about the law? Or let me put that differently. Like what legal skills could business folks benefit from? I think you mentioned knowing the rules of the board game. You talked about contracts, but if you
Yep.
could just expand a little bit on that, I think that would be great.
Yeah. So the biggest things that business people could learn from lawyers is all of the um all of the okay, let's start with the big one. Persuasive storytelling, I think, is a big part of being an attorney. The attorneys from like your first year class until you graduate, you're learning how to like write briefs and write memos, but not just like write your opinion. You're taught how to create defensible arguments based on something other than your feelings, so that you can convince some critical, as a judge, as opposing counsel, as a client, just someone who disagrees with you, trying to convince an
Mhm.
opposing viewpoint that they should shift their view. And in business, that's huge. And obviously it plays a lot in marketing. But even if you're trying to, convince your board to do something, like I see a lot of business people that I run into are really good at just describing what they want, but not necessarily good at describing what they want in a way that is, again, persuasive and defensible. So that's a huge trait that I think could carry over. Um, the other thing, I guess, just all the stuff we run into in business, it's your classic issues like labor law, IP, just knowing the basics of where those potential fires are and which ones to put out first, like how to prioritize risk, I think is a big one. Um, there's a lot of yeah, a lot of overlap with the skill sets.
That's wonderful. And let's flip that question a little bit, which is what business skills do you think lawyers need to know?
So so I'll start with a big one, how to strategically mitigate risk instead of just running away from it. And what I mean by that is, something I talk about in my class is something I call the opportunity cliff. And the opportunity cliff is just the idea that, to me, the business world is like this green pasture, and at some point there's a cliff to nowhere, and you have all these companies, all these sheep that are grazing, and if you want to keep it safe, you stay as far away from that edge as possible. No one really knows where the edge is, they just know it's somewhere over there. And so you have all these companies that are like collected and tightened, and it makes it harder to build out your market. They're all competing for the same customers, they're all competing for the same resources. But you have a few companies, usually in my world it's the startups, that are willing to go a little bit closer to the edge and to the unknown. And the lawyer's job is to let them know like how far you can go without falling off, without becoming the next FTX, without becoming the next Enron, without becoming like the next insert company name that's done something terrible. But with that mindset in, I think some attorneys set that a little bit too safe. But you have some attorneys that will, again, their job is to advise you as best they can of where that edge is when you might tumble off. But you can get pretty close, and it's not so much about avoiding all risk. It's about really being able to like quantify it from a business standpoint. In our class, we have a whole section we have sections and exercises on like how do you quantify and define a risk from a perspective of, is it worth taking? Not to say like nothing bad will happen, but if something bad does happen, was it worth it happening? Like, was it worth jumping in and having that trigger? That's probably the biggest one. The
Mhm.
biggest one, and one of the things that led me more into business consulting, is that I have a high risk tolerance. But I know a lot of attorneys tend to have
Don't.
sort of a risk aversion. And in business, that's like, risk is risk is fun. Risk is part of the game. Um, Other things are just the like, you need to understand as an attorney, you need to understand the nature of business. And what I mean by that is, ideally you would have had your own business or started a business or seen the workings of it. Like ideally your exposure to business isn't just from a theoretical standpoint, because you need to be able to anticipate what your client is going to naturally go. Like in an ideal world, a client before every decision is going to call you up and be like, should I do this? Should I do this? That's not how it works. And so if you're really going to help your client from a business standpoint, you need to be able to like empathize with your client, like understand what are the natural courses of action that most business founders or CEOs or executives or whoever that client is, what is that route that they generally take, so that you as an attorney can catch them at the right point to be like, hey, I saw that you are dumping a bunch of money into your R&D this year. That probably means you're about to create a bunch of new stuff. Have you updated your employment agreements to make sure that all of your IP is correctly,
Mhm.
captured at the, like there's these spider web of causality that starts to pop out of that one little action, and you wouldn't know that if you didn't know the nature of business. You wouldn't know that that little decision is going to cause this domino effect of things that if you catch it now, you can save your client a ton of headache. But if you wait until they're actually calling you, like, oh my God, we forgot to, lock down our IP and now it's been stolen. That I think is big. So exposing yourself to situations where if you don't have that business experience, take a class, take something to expose you to those types of red flags and hints of the nature of business and how it unfolds.
Yeah, in the legal world, we call that issue spotting, right? Or in
Yeah,
academia, we call that issue spotting.
yeah,
So
that's good.
yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
I'm,
It's
I'm
issue spotting.
I love that you brought up your class because I want to talk a bit more about that. You mentioned some of the quote unquote case studies of the FTXs and the Enrons and insert company. How much of these case studies do you bring into your class? Is that the approach you use, which is like, let's look at what's happened in the past, let's look at what went wrong, and then let's devise a plan of how we can avoid some of these failures? Walk us through some of the things that you incorporate into your class and how you teach students to be maybe a little bit more comfortable with risk.
Yeah. So yeah, so we do tie in some big ones like like FTX and Enron and where it went bad, because so rarely do you have like such a clear example of something wrong happening where you can dissect it and examine it. I'm also really big on like every semester, every week, like almost I'd say like the day before class, I go through the news and just see, is there anything new that happened? Um, I want to especially thank Elon Musk for contributing so much to my class, for all the different things that he seems to get himself into. But we try to make it fun. We try to make it topical because Enron, that was, I don't even know how long ago that was now.
Century
And
ago. Yeah.
FTX, it's recent, but not recent in the tech world. That's already kind of a page five story. So yeah, we have some core columns of bad examples, and then we hook it to whatever lessons being taught in class, whether that's risk mitigation or whether that's employment law, labor law. But then I'm also always on the lookout for what new thing is happening. Like the in class we have a lot of these case laws which try to standardize, don't do this specifically because this specific thing's bad. But in the business world, there's so many permutations of bad. There's so many it's not always like the same bad thing keeps happening. It is like some person found a completely new, though somewhat similar way to cause a problem that could have otherwise been avoidable had they done something, less stupid or less fraudulent, or like there's a whole spectrum. Like it varies. And so
Yeah.
that kind of makes class fun.
Yeah, it sounds like your class, and by the way, students love your class. It's
Thank you.
designed to provide a toolkit, right,
Yeah.
of various things you need to know if you're either in a business, running a business, operating a business, consulting a business, and so on and so forth. And you kind of listed everything from labor and employment, IP, contracts, business organizations, corporate governance, those types of things. I'm curious to hear how folks can take this toolkit that you're teaching them and leverage it in the real world. So let's say someone understands the intersection of law and business, has no desire to practice law, but wants to take this toolkit and use it in real life. Like, what are some of the professional opportunities out there for them besides, what you're doing, consulting?
So, God, it's like I would say start with what makes you happy. Like, what do you like? Let's start with what you want to do. Which might sounds kind of high level, but I guess because it's applicable to a lot. Like, let's say you wanted to be an artist. Like, let's like you just want to be a painter or like create content on TikTok. Our class covers, again, like copyrights and IP and like how to manage the like how do you can actually own what it is that you own? Like, how do you make sure that this intangible asset that you've created is like a revenue generator for you. So we cover stuff like that. If you want to run a company, obviously we cover things we the first week of class is all about the basics of accounting. Like, accounting is the DNA of a business. Whether or not a business is going to survive or not will be found in those numbers. So we cover the like how do you run a company, how do you navigate operational liabilities, how do you navigate those labor law things. If you're going to be a consultant, I think we help to cover a lot of how to prioritize uh, different business problems from a legal lens, so that when you're out there in the wild, you can get a sense of which are the biggest fires and what ways to put them out the quickest. And so on that note, I mean that's really in my opinion, the purpose of school is trying to build that muscle memory. So it's so when you are confronted with a problem, your options are like Google, Chat GPT, or hopefully remembering that thing, like, oh, I should approach it from this way. Like, these are the tools. Like in our negotiations segment, these are the tools that help me take an abstract problem and define it within parameters that then allow me to make a decision. So this class, I feel like, is the toolkit that you get is to help you quickly um, qualify a problem, an abstract problem, in a way that you know how to address it, how to take a step towards, a solution is what we like to cover. And we've had what's fun, it's not just after class. I've had some students in class that have been able to leverage what they've learned. We had one student a couple years ago who was in the middle of a negotiation and felt like they had no leverage whatsoever. They felt like they were basically at the mercy of the other party in negotiating this big contract at their job. And we stayed after class, we talked through it, and he had all the leverage. Like it was an uncomfortable amount of leverage. I had to talk him through, look, you're in a position where you legally, from what you've described to me, the contracts you have in place and whatnot, appear to be able to do whatever you want to do. What you're really nervous about is whether the other party might, want to willingly participate or want to, negotiate in good faith or whatnot. And you can use that leverage to say, look, I want to work with you. I want to make this work. I want to make the numbers work. I want us to be happy. But at the end of the day, if we can't come to an agreement, we're gonna hit go. We're gonna hit go on this. And it changed his whole perspective on it. It was wonderful being able to see him go from a sense of again, I'm just gonna have to take whatever they give me, to no, I get to define what is an outcome in this relationship. So anyways, yeah, a lot of real world, how do you deal with business? And business is pretty abstract. So it's how do we standardize it in a way that it's approachable and more structured.
Right. So giving them a framework that can be applied
Yep.
anywhere. And yeah, that's one of the things I love about our MSL program is that A, it's extremely practical, like you just described, but B, students are literally taking what they're learning today in the classroom and applying it tomorrow in their jobs. And that's sort of the ROI, as they say, from the
Yep.
degree. So my final question for you, why do you enjoy teaching? I know you're a very passionate educator. I can tell from just this conversation that you really enjoy it. So what about
Yeah.
teaching do you love?
So okay. I believe most people are passionate about learning. I believe that 90%, 99%. And I base that base in a former life. I did infographics, and I create really boring data set, or I'd be given very boring data sets, and then my job was to make them interesting, make them visual, make them make them something that people would share. And I'd have these really dry, boring data sets, but they'd go viral online. You get 300,000, a million, 2 million people sharing this data that they otherwise would have never acknowledged, never cared about, never talked about. And so I feel like most people are passionate about learning, but most information is not available in a way that stirs up that passion. And so what I like about it, I like helping people. I like making learning more accessible. I like finding ways to stir up that passion and get them interested. And um what I love about teaching, I mean, if I want to get my sandbox, my soapbox moment, if you accept the reality, if you accept the reality that our brains haven't evolved much in the past 200,000 years or whatnot, since our ancestors clicked rocks in caves, then everything we have today is a product of this relay race of education, this relay race of one group of people learn something neat, and then they pass that torch to the next generation and the next generation. And so being able to participate in that relay race, being able to take all of the weird experiences I've had, the failures I've had, the successes I've had, the milestones that I've accomplished, the businesses that have failed, the fires that have started, being able to take all of that and put it into use, and then be able to pass that torch to a bunch of people that are interested in participating in that relay race. That's special. That's something that is just a lot of fun, and it's a lot of I don't know, it just makes it feel like it was all worth it. All those experiences are worth it when you can pass it on to someone else who can now use that knowledge to then do something, build something, have a good life.